On today's episode of the Locked On Texans Podcast, we talk about the man who orchestrates the best position group on the Houston Texans.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Battle Red Nation, welcome to today's episode. I'm the Texans Credential Media Member and Texans football analyst John Hickman, alongside the man with the big hat, the PV on, the big smile, Brian Big Sarge Barfield. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day and for being a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to all of our Himalaya every day as our players. Man, we appreciate y'all. On today's episode, we'll dive into the YouTube comments. Also, making room for the next. That will include, should Houston make room for the next young defensive line by moving on from Danico Autry, that could save them some cap money, or what does the future look like for that Houston Texans D-line? They need to get some young guys in there, but we open up today's show with an exclusive one-on-one with defensive line coach Rod Wright. So without further ado,
all the nicknames of the defensive linemen.
Oh, yeah, I named them. Yeah. Oh, you want me to go?
Yeah,
go
we'll
through
see.
it? All right, you got Will's Terminator, D Hunt Cyborg, Foley's Big Dog, Tim got a couple names.
Yeah.
Skinny Timmy,
Tim
Lee, Tim Time. Then you got, I already said Foley. You got Mario, Wild Dog, and then we also call him Big Za.
Yeah.
You got Autry. We call Autry Junkyard Dog and The Undertaker. You got DB. We call him Deadshot and Killer, but we don't really say Killer no more, just in case.
Yeah.
We call Jerry. We call him Unk. And then you got Kurt, Ultimate Warrior. You got D. Horton. We just call him D. Horton, but I got a name coming that I ain't told him yet, so I can't.
You can't reveal it just
D.
yet.
Horton, man.
Yeah.
D. Horton. You got Tommy. We call Tommy 2 times. You got Solomon. He a rookie. We just call him Solo. He a rookie. He lucky. We even call him that. And then you got JP with the AP.
Yeah, JP
with the AP.
Now, Coach, the reason why I asked you that was because
By the way, D Hunt gave me this black eye.
no way.
Yeah. In pre-game.
He got that excited. That hype.
It was an accident. He did a little move to get off, and he hit me in the nose. Actually, my nose.
Yeah.
So, if you wonder if I wasn't in no bar fight.
But the reason why I asked you about the nicknames was because of the relationship that you have established with the defensive line, and you have them all on the same page. When did that start?
Day one, man. This man right here was very intentional. When we took over, from interviewing, from me and him having conversations of how we want it to look as far as the makeup of our room. Myself and Nate he played at Ball State, I played at Texas. He was a part of a good D-line, I was part of a good D-line. And I always try to put myself in a position of like, how did I feel when I was on the best teams?
Yeah.
And I always felt those teams were close. I always felt those D-line rooms were it was the culture that allowed them to be themselves, but also a culture that held each other accountable. And I think that when it comes to that point, man, like you just have a certain swagger, a certain demeanor about yourself where, no one can divide you. And I felt like when you have that type of bond, that type of culture, it's gonna show on the field on Sundays.
When you look at that defensive line unit, and I know that Will Anderson gets talked about a lot, Daniel Hunter gets talked about a lot. What about those interior guys who get in there and do that dirty work, like a Tim Settle, like having Foley, Fadakasi back? The way that those guys are able to disrupt so much on the inside.
Well, I mean, they, we notice a lot of them are dogs, like, even with their name. Now, Tim, some of them names, they already came in there with that name, but some of them, they got names and they got here. But it's just, man, like, it just reminds me of Foley, like, it's either Friday or Saturday. One of those days, he come out, I think it's Foley. Foley on Friday comes out there, he has, like, a blue-collar polo shirt on.
Yeah.
And to me, that solidifies that with the dog names, what those guys are inside. Like, they blue collar. Like, they ain't got the flashy names. They ain't got the, the so-called respect when it comes to what people say, but, like, they're gritty, they're grimy. They'll knock you back. They'll play hard. They'll do all the little dirty work inside to get the job done, and that's what they pride themselves in, and that's how they see themselves. I've heard them all say, like, everyone has been told no at some point, whether it's been told no in college, been told no in the league. Everybody has kind of a chip on their shoulder to not prove it to everyone else, but to prove it to themselves first.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what the inside guys are for sure, and I just think that's kind of the DNA in the entire room.
I only have a couple of more questions left for you, Coach. Getting back, though, to the way that Will has played this year, and I know he dealt with an injury, and at the wrong time. He was just named AFC Defensive Player of the Month, and then he gets injured, but he comes back, and he said last week before the Chargers game that this is he was excited going in. He couldn't wait till Saturday because this is the healthy that he's been in a very long time. He was ready to play. What have you seen from him this season, and how much of an influence has Danielle Hunter been on him?
Well, first thing, Will doesn't shy away from his faith, his faith in God and his divine purpose. Me and him are close on that as far as how I believe and he believes. That's why I think we connect. We really believe in a higher calling, and when bad things happen like that, you feel like you go to that. You know what I'm saying? Like, you get set down, you get hurt, you're like, okay, God, what is the purpose in this? Yeah. And then I feel like when he got set down from an injury last year, instead of crying and moping about it, he put his energy into the why and what can I get from this? How can I get better? And when he got hurt this year, he already been there before. So this time, like, when he got hurt, last year was a lot harder for him. And this year, he already kind of knew his process. He already kind of knew how he wanted to come back. And it's like, okay, put all your focus on what game are you coming back? How do you want that game to be? And he did that. And he just has the toughness. Daniil, just having that veteran who's been there before, I think that Will, everybody knows Will's an edge setter and a violent player. And knowing him in college as a pass rusher, but in the NFL, he wanted to take a huge step and be known as a pass rusher. And when you have a guy who has freaking little Will right there talking about you, so when you had that kind of a guy who's had multiple 10 sacks and 12 sacks to him is that's just what he does. When you have that kind of guy on your team, he can tell you how it feels to, Daniil was stuck on maybe 1.5 sacks for a little while, but he had a confidence of just like, okay, I'm gonna just keep doing what I need to do because I know the levee's gonna break. To have a guy on the other side that can kind of counsel you through that, because every guy gets stuck at some point, man. You stuck at 3, or you stuck at 4, you stuck at 7, you stuck at 9, whatever it is. He was able to tell him, like, hey, man, it's going to come. Like, just keep believing in your process, keep watching film, keep doing all the little things you need to do to finish with that quarterback in your arms and on the ground. So I think that brought him a sense of calmness and confidence, knowing that, hey, man, this guy's done it before. This guy's telling me this. It just really reassures and confirms what we always talk about is the process. And Will, there's nobody better than the process. He still comes in. He had 1.5 sacks in the biggest game of his life. On the very next day, he's in here watching it with me. Yeah. Mad, like, man, I'm like seriously mad at himself because man, I was this close on this one. If I'd have done this, if I would have done that. Most guys, they get 1.5 or they get 1. Man, they not even watching the film with that type of conviction and that type of passion.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? They're satisfied. He's never satisfied, ever. You know, he gets whatever he gets, man, he's so locked in for the next game. Yeah. It's incredible. It's almost like he didn't even do anything.
Yeah.
You know, and that to me, that's his edge. Like that's his winning edge, you know.
That was defensive line coach Rod Wright, one of the guys who orchestrates one of the best position groups in the NFL. That defensive line unit is very, very good, John. I like what I've heard from Rod Wright, and I like the production that they were able to put on the field this season. They're only gonna get better.
Yeah. Now we got to talk about, what does the future look like? Should they move on from Danico Autry? Should the Houston Texans look to draft a D tackle early, maybe mid-round? We'll dive into that and more on today's show. But Texan fans, this is an amazing time to take a break, breathe, woosah, and get you guys in on the action. The NBA action is getting started. We're now after All-Star break, so you know it's really about to be crunch time. There's no better place to get in on that action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your bets into a same game parlay. The app is easy to use, easy to navigate, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Ain't no waiting around for your money. Now they got it right now. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Big Sarge, this is the perfect time to talk about whether or not the Houston Texans should move on from D tackle DN Denico Autry, who the Houston Texans signed this last offseason. They'll save, I think, was it roughly around $10 million or something like that. Would be a huge cap relief, something that they need. But you're looking at a player last year, and I can't wait to get your thoughts on this. You're looking for a player who, after he came back from his suspension, we know that he served the 6-game suspension, 6 sacks, a ton of pressures, was a immediate impact on that D-line. Also came in when that D-line started to break down on the inside. So he was a godsend. Does moving on from a player that can impact the game like he can to save the $10 million matter? And if so, one thing I can't wait to talk about is, if you do that, your replacement plan needs to be going to get a young dog out this draft, right?
Yeah. John, it's like 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other. Because on one hand, do the Houston Texans need the money? Yes, they do. Are they cash strapped? Yes, they are. So that $10 million would help a lot to be able to sign some of these players that they are going to draft, and to be able to add that on to, and if they can get some other people to restructure their contracts, if they can get, Danielle Hunter to restructure his contract, maybe, Laramie to restructure his contract, and a couple of other people, Azeez Al-Shaair, to restructure his contract, they may be able to free up some money that way. So you definitely would love to be able to have that $10 million on the book. That's the 6 in one hand. The half a dozen on the other, John, is you're getting a Danico Autry, and this time you're going to get him for a full season. This time he's not going to come in with a 6-game suspension. He's also playing with a chip on his shoulder. John, I got a chance to speak with him before he left in the offseason. I got a chance to, when they were doing their exit interviews, and he said, I have something to prove. I don't think that people really realize who I am and what I can do. And we didn't make mention of the suspension, but I knew exactly what he was talking about, John. And if you go back and you look, missing him those first 6 games, they were able to, to hold it together. That defense still played very well. But imagine what they could have done if he would have been in the lineup. Imagine what they would have looked like, going up against Minnesota. Maybe a little bit different against Minnesota. Maybe a little bit different against Green Bay. So not having him in the lineup, and now the Houston Texans had enough time to be able to orchestrate what they needed to do, knowing that he wasn't going to be there the first 6 games. And I know that he's getting a little bit older. I know that but he's still effective. He's older, but he's effective. And John, we just got through listening to one of the best defensive line coaches in the NFL, in Rod Wright. And if anybody's going to have him ready to go, it's definitely going to be Rod Wright. Defensive coordinator Matt Burke says that when you walk by that defensive line room, it's like, it's like a party. And then what he meant by that, he said they so loud and they be talking and they be talking, and the energy that you could feel from that room. And he said, and they take all of that and bring it to the field. And that's why they play as a cohesive unit. That's why they move as one. And so bringing Danico Autry back would put him back on the field in that scheme that he already knows. And I think that, John, I think he still has some production left in him.
Yeah, he does. And so this is what's going on with this situation with Danico Autry. He would cost the Houston Texans $10.2 million this year. The Texans will save $8.8 million by designating him a post-June cut. So there is some light at the end of the tunnel. I'm going to make sense of this for some of our listeners and viewers. Okay. Would have given the Houston Texans more juice against Detroit, against Green Bay, against what was the other team that you named?
Minnesota.
Would he have given the Houston Texans more juice? Maybe so, but the problem in those games were not on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, the defensive side of the ball. It was the offense. They didn't score enough points. They were not holding up their end of the bargain. So now you're looking at, if I could save $8.8 million and bring over pieces so we don't have issues like the Minnesota game. We don't have issues like the Detroit game or the Green Bay game. I think that's how I would make sense of it. Saving that money would allow the Houston Texans to get some players on the offensive side of the ball that can give them the juice that they need. Now, this isn't necessarily me advocating for Danico Autry to get cut, because I'd actually like to see Danico be brought back. But when you have a draft that features at the D-line unit guys like Alfred Collins late, Shamar Turner second round, Jordan Phillips, Deion Walker, right? You got some of these guys, Simeon Barrow Jr., You got some of these guys that will be available late for the Houston Texans, maybe second round, third round, fourth round. Where I can make sense of cutting him is, we'll say that $8.8 million, and Sarge, stop me if I'm wrong, because you just called Rod Wright the best defensive line coach in the NFL, right?
Yep.
By far the best, one of the best, but by far the best unit coaches on this team, right?
Yes. Well,
but let me make this point. Have we
Dino also cornerback?
Dino's one of them. Dino's my guy.
My bad. Dino's
my guy. But have we not seen Rod Wright, especially since he's been here in the last 2 seasons, get the most out of Sheldon Rankins, who just got cut? Malik Collins, he had a good year under Malik Collins. Khalil Davis was a name that got us all excited the last couple of years until he was traded. Tommy T had a good year this year. What I'm getting at is, it feels like no matter who you put in that unit, they're going to coach them up and get them ready to play on Sundays.
Yeah.
So that's where I think this is one of those situations for Nick Caserio to really sit down and say, man, last year, my defense, the guys that I brought, Denico Autry helped, of course, but Mario Edwards, Folu Fadakowski, Daniil Hunter, those 3 free agent acquisitions really helped us out up front. No matter who we put up there, they had good moments and were productive. Offensively, I got to do something different. I can save 8.8 that can help me out immediately. And I trust the fact that D'Amico Ryans and his defensive coaching staff, along with the fact that we said, hey, Rod Wright, we're bringing you back. You're going to be our new defensive line coach. They can coach him up and get ready to play. And if that's the case, I'm okay with the thought process of moving on from Danico Autry because I can make sense of using that money to bring over some offensive weapons, building that side of the ball up.
So, John, which one of those guys that you mentioned plays the defensive tackle and the defensive end position? Which one of them can play both of them? Because that's what Danico Autry,
those young guys.
Yeah, because that's what Danico Autry brings. You can put Danico Autry at the defensive tackle position, or you can put him at the defensive end position. So now, when you bring him in, you can have him come in for Danielle Hunter to spell him for a second, and then when Danielle comes in, he could just move over and replace Tim Settle, and you still keep that disruptive force in the game. You talked about, against Minnesota. You talked about against Green Bay and Detroit, or not Detroit, but it was someone else, another team. But John, when you talk about those games, and you said it was from an offensive standpoint, that is true. The offense didn't do exactly what they needed to do to win those games. But John, imagine having him in for that game. Maybe he puts a little bit more pressure on Sam Darnold and he makes a errant throw that turns into a turnover. Or maybe he, makes a tackle that stops them on third down. Maybe against Green Bay, he gets to Jordan Love a little bit quicker or causes some type of disruption on the line to free up somebody else or to even help the defensive backs. So that's all I'm saying is when you have a guy like that, and don't get me wrong, I'm with you, John, because like I said, on the six in the one hand, you need the money. The half a dozen in the other, you're going to lose.
What did they say on what she said on Set It Up? I need that money.
Well, John,
need the money,
right? So in closing, he is a player though, John, that can play two positions. And so if you're not going to bring back Foley Fatukasi,
he can. No, listen, and it's again, this is one of those situations where we're going to see what Nick Caserio does, and if he's going to be ballsy enough to do it. No disrespect, of course. That's I'm not saying he's not like that, but we're going to see what type of GM Houston has. Yeah, backs against the corner. You went all out last year, and you signed some great guys, and some of those guys that came over. Again, we will not discredit Foley's what he meant to this team last year
at all.
We cannot discredit Mario Edwards. We cannot discredit, of course, Danielle Hunter. Can't discredit those guys. Defense,
Derek Barnett.
Derek Barnett bringing him back. Yeah. Defense did what they had to do. But if I look in the mirror, I say, hey, man, I gotta get some weapons over here. And some of these free agent receivers, you can maybe sign them on a cheaper 2-year deal, so that way it may be a little bit more backloaded in year 2 or maybe year 3, to where you're not paying it all up front in year 1. You don't have to sign these many 1-year deals, so you have some flexibility long term. $8.8 million can help with that.
Yeah.
So when we come back, we got to go to the YouTube. Sarge, it's been a while. It's been a while. They miss you. The very first comment is for you. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Before we close out today's show, it's time to dive in the YouTube comments. My man Reginald Rager, 2143. Sarge,
one of our favorites.
Debo was good 5 years ago. Debo didn't stay healthy. I'd rather keep Diggs.
So don't get me wrong. If I have to pick between Debo Samuels and Stephon Diggs, I'm picking Stephon Diggs. If it's 10 times, I'm picking him 10 out of 10. I'm picking him 10 out of 10. But let's just say Stephon Diggs decides to take his talents up 45 North and play with his brother with the Dallas Cowboys. Now you're left still trying to find someone to replace, Stephon Diggs, and Tank Dell is not going to be able to play. And like I said, my whole thing with Debo is you bring him in for a 1-year rental. And John, we've seen what players do when they get disgruntled. We've seen how players act when they're ready to leave. I mean, I know we're talking about football, but I mean, when James Harden was ready to leave, he gained a lot of weight and then he got up out of here. And then next thing you know, you'll be like, that's not the same James Harden. So You know, you look at Debo, maybe Debo was just Debo wasn't giving it his all because he knew that he didn't want to be in San Francisco anymore. And he knows that he can't pull what he can't pull with Kyle Shanahan, he can't pull with, Denico Ryans, what he did with Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah, shout out to Swan. She just posted on Twitter at the time of this recording a separation of advanced analytics of a wide receiver separating. And I think Debo was like second to last on being able to separate. And she also said that's why it looks like he been eating that Papados. So we don't want him to come out to Houston, go see some more Papados. He's going to end up looking like me.
John, well, hold on real quickly. So he was also playing with Brock Purdy. Let's just keep it a buck. Like, C.J. Stroud is not Brock Purdy.
I saw one receiver, Texans receiver in his history, great receiver, one of the best in this decade, play with about 4 quarterbacks in 1 year.
I think he played with Jack Yates starting quarterback 1 year.
He probably did.
He's a community college flag football.
He probably did. And I still saw him get open and make plays down the field.
It's different, though. I would never say that Deebo Samuel is DeAndre Hopkins. Never. I would never put them in the same category.
I probably shouldn't have did that. You're right. Let's go back to the YouTube. We got to get younger. This is from my man Jalen Johnson, 0339. We got to get younger at wide receiver. I appreciate what Diggs did, but he and D-Hop, these guys are in their 30s. Same with Cup. They don't fit the timeline with CJ, Will, and Stingley. He continues with by saying, that's why we need to draft a receiver in this draft, whether at pick 25 or in the second round if they move down. Go get Ibuka if he's there at 25, or if you move to the 30s, get Trey Harris or Matthew Golden. I like Trey Harris a lot. I'm starting to like Trey Harris a lot, guys. Also, free agency, Darius Slayton or Elijah Moore. And if you do, you have a solid receiving core with Nico, Ibuka, Golden, Harris, Slayton, Moore, and maybe you keep Hutchinson as wide receiver 4. Good episode. I am very again, I'm intrigued to see what Houston does in this draft with addressing the wide receiver position, because I think that with the ideology change, bringing over Nick Caley, we should see things a little bit easier for the wide receiver group. And I think because of that, that should allow Houston to maybe draft the wide receiver extremely late as a project. But also in those first 2 rounds, I just don't see them skipping over a top wide receiver being available. And Sarge, I actually want to ask you, at 25, does it make more sense to trade back and gain more picks and get maybe a top wide receiver in the earlier rounds to give yourself more flexibility throughout the draft?
How far are you trading back?
They're at 25 right now. They were at 22 last year and ended up at 42, right?
Yeah.
So maybe the same range in between, 28 and 40.
Nah.
Trey Harris would be there.
I wouldn't trade back that far, John, because if you trade back that far, that means that some of the guys that you probably could have gotten that with the talent that you need. See, that's the thing. Like, you could trade back and get more picks, but the further you trade back, the lower the talent is going to be. And so I of course, Nick Caley may bring a system that CJ can thrive in as far as putting anybody over there in wide receiver 2. But if not, and because you're dealing with the first year play caller, I seen that in the comments too, talking about why we keep talking about first year play callers. But with the first year play caller, John, you don't want to push yourself so far back that you miss out on some of that top wide receiver talent if that guy is going to be your day one starter.
Yeah. Guys are flirting with the idea of maybe trading for Chris Olave. I mean, the Saints are in a bad spot right now.
Yeah, very bad.
I'm sure he wants to get out. I'm sure they would like some flexibility. Chris Olave is a guy that I like a lot, out of Ohio State. Spent time with CJ. That is an idea that I would definitely flirt with as long as the cost isn't too high.
What is the cost being too high, John? And with that being said, the cost being too high for him, I'm not going to even lie. I don't know what the cost would be, but I would definitely pick up the phone and call Aaron Glenn and see what the price is for Garrett Wilson.
Absolutely. So Garrett Wilson is, I think, in a little bit more of a favorable spot for New York And I think that with them moving on from Aaron Rodgers and they're going to move on from Devontae, I think that may compel Garrett Wilson to want to stay. If they would have ran it back with Aaron Rodgers and Devontae, I think Garrett Wilson would have been like, hey, man, listen, get me out of here. With Chris Olave, his first 2 seasons, over 200, over 2,100 yards, 9 TDs. Last year, got hurt, didn't play a lot of games. 400 yards, 12.5 yards per carry when he was out there, 1 TD. He would absolutely be perfect alongside with Nico Collins.
Yeah, for
now,
sure.
what's too much? I don't know if I'm trading a second rounder for him.
For Chris Olave?
I don't know if I'm doing that. I don't know if I'm doing that. Now, for sure not a first. And if it would be like a second round, maybe it would be a 6th. I don't know, maybe next year. But I don't know how much Chris Olave would move the needle for the offense compared to going to find a younger player on a cheaper deal that you don't have to
still take the top off the
for.
defense, though. He can still take the top off of defense.
Yeah, but some of these receivers coming out can do the same thing.
Yeah, but some of these players coming out don't have that rapport with CJ.
That matters.
And
That matters.
If you're Nick, you're starting it with a 4th and then seeing what they, hey, look, we got a 4th and a 4th and a 6th next year.
Maybe a 4th and a 3rd next year.
With his injury history?
That's the thing. That's why I ain't going too high this year. And we gotta ask ourselves, you got a guy like, if you're gonna trade, okay, maybe you trade up for a bouquet.
Either a bouquet
trade
or
up for Luther Burden. I think Golden would be there at 25. I don't think he's gonna surpass 25.
I think so too.
But if you trade back to get more assets, are you still in that same range to go get Golden? Do Trey Harris tickle your fancy? So I think between 25 and 40, 20 and 40, Houston has an option at 25 to either move up and go get a couple of guys or trade back, get more assets and get some more and get a receiver.
And real quick, John, before we end this, I'm just gonna say this. I think that I don't think that people are looking at this thing from thinking that your wide receiver just gonna be there. This isn't a quarterback friendly draft. And so if you got some of these offensive-minded, these offensive-minded head coaches who want to get better, they may take some of these wide receivers early because it's not a quarterback-friendly draft. I mean, you think about it, the New York Giants need a quarterback, and they might even trade back.
Yeah. Thank you guys for watching today's episode of the Locked On Texans Podcast. We got more heat for y'all next week. Hopefully it'll stop raining too. Follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12 and also subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube.
And make sure you follow me on the app formerly known as Twitter at Big Sarge Sports with the Z. Special programming note: Big Sarge will be representing the Locked On Texans podcast at the NFL draft Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Tuesday, we get a chance to speak with D'Amico Ryans, head coach of the Houston Texans. Wednesday, we get a chance to talk to general manager, executive vice president, and general manager Nick Caserio. And we also going to talk to some of those defensive linemen there, John.
What the future look like? Can't stop, won't stop. That's what we're doing, the Locked On Texans Podcast. Until next time, ladies and gents, peace.